U.S. Constitution, Article 2, Executive Branch, Section 2, Clause 1. The President shall have the power to grant reprieves and pardons for offenses against the United States, except in cases of impeachment. So can the President pardon himself? Short answer, yes. Long answer, yes. And let me tell you why. Hi y'all, welcome to Casey's Corner. Today's episode is a little outside of my normal sphere, but given its current relevance, I really wanted to address the topic of presidential pardons. First of all, what is a presidential pardon? Generally speaking, it is the power to forgive a crime, which nullifies the punishments or other legal consequences of that crime. However, they can also be granted after some or all of the sentence is served, which means its sole impact is clearing the convicted person's record. Now, the presidential pardon power does have some limits, like it can only be used to pardon federal crimes and cannot be used on the state level or for civil cases. It also cannot be used on impeachment cases. Another limit is that the pardon power cannot be used before a crime has been committed, because this would essentially give the president absolute power to waive laws, and that is not a power the president has within the bounds of the Constitution. So, a brief history of the practice of pardoning. The whole idea of the presidential pardon power dates back to the idea of the prerogative of mercy in Mosaic Greek and Roman law, and the more specific use as applied to U.S. law from the English prerogative of kings, which has been recognized since the 7th century. This practice was rife with corruption, however, as pardons were often limited to those who could afford to pay the monarchy for them. Attempts to curtail this seemingly limitless power was largely unsuccessful until Parliament was able to pass the Act of Settlement in 1701. Given that the development of the U.S. government was heavily influenced by English political knowledge, it isn't surprising that the idea of an executive pardoning power would be integrated into the U.S. government. But why is this power important? Well, there are actually a few reasons that this power was included in the U.S. Constitution and is used in other democratic nations as well. One is to be able to temper justice with mercy when appropriate. If new evidence is brought forward later and it is determined that someone has been wrongfully convicted, the presidential pardon can be used, though this is not the only route for a wrongful conviction case, just the easiest. It can also be useful in cases in which the punishment of a convicted person is unreasonably harsh, or when someone is guilty of something, but that guilt is due to unfortunate or extenuating circumstances. It can also be used in less wholesome situations, like if someone committed crimes and did so to benefit the president, they can be pardoned. And it's even been used in the past to mitigate impacts of major crises, like the Civil War for Confederates, or for people involved in the Whiskey Rebellion, even for Vietnam draft evaders. The Supreme Court has, in the past, had opportunities to rule on cases regarding the presidential pardon power, and has always upheld the constitutional privilege, choosing not to limit it by interpretation, mainly because the clause really doesn't leave much up to interpretation. The president shall have the power to grant reprieves and pardons for offenses against the United States, except in cases of impeachment. Can the president therefore pardon himself for crimes he or she has committed against the United States, whether charged or not, as long as it's not pardoning of impeachment? Yes. The better question is, should he? Thank you all for listening to this week's episode of Casey's Corner. I hope you all have a great day, and don't forget to stand up and use your voice. Bye, y'all.